Welcome to the Science for Sport podcast, where we dive into stories and insights that drive peak performance. Join us as we uncover the secrets behind the science of success. Here's your host, Richard Graves.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Science for Sport podcast with me, Richard Graves. This week, we're discussing the impact of sports science on football. How has it enhanced the game? How does it help individuals? And we ask, is there still room for some older training methods in modern day football? Chris Morgan is a former Premier League footballer who started out his career in the 90s with First Division side Barnsley before moving to Sheffield United. When he began his career, sports science wasn't a term you heard often used. But as his career progressed, so too did the influence of sports science on footballers and the game at large. So, let's hear from him now.
Unlocking sports science to push the limits of human potential. This is the Science for Sport podcast.
Chris, thanks for joining us on this week's show. For those that aren't perhaps familiar with your career, give them a little bit of your background.
Right, okay. Seems like a long time ago now. Left school, signed at Barnsley as an apprentice. People nowadays know that as a scholar, but we were good old fashioned apprentices. Worked my way through Barnsley's system. Luckily enough to make my debut in the Premier League for Danny Wilson's team. Made my debut in the January. Played some games in the Premier League from January till the end of the season. And then obviously had the roller coaster at Barnsley of Premier League into the Championship, and then unfortunately, lost in a playoff final against Ipswich at the old Wembley, and then found ourselves in League One. It was after that League One season, which sort of lo and behold, when I look back at my career, probably that season in League One for Barnsley was probably the worst season of my career in terms of performances from myself, in my opinion. So when Neil Warnock and Sheffield United came and sort of made it clear that they wanted to sign me, I think I was at a stage where I was ready for a change, and he needed to do something different. Sheffield United they'd lost basically the two semi-finals against Liverpool, Arsenal. They'd lost the playoff final against Wolves, and just everything, sort of as it was down the road from Barnsley to Sheffield United, all seemed as though it was a club that was in a real good place, even though it had lost the playoff final against Wolves. So, I made the decision then to leave Barnsley to go to Sheffield United. Probably had, 13 years at Sheffield United, Championship, Premier League, then obviously getting injured, retiring, going into coaching, which I'm sure we'll cover as we go on, doing 2 stints as caretaker manager, and then obviously moving on to Chesterfield as assistant manager, Port Vale as assistant manager, and then finding myself in the role that I do now as a FIFA football agent.
Let's initially look at the broad overview of your career, both as a player and then as a coach and a football agent. When you go back to the mid-90s and the facilities at Barnsley when you were coming up, as a scholar, as you say, or apprentice, professional football clubs now are very well catered for when it comes to young players, their academies, the technology, the resources that are available to help them every step of the way. What was it like in the mid-90s, and how different would that landscape look to the modern day apprentice coming up through the system?
Without meaning to sound like an old man, Rich, and not being disrespectful to Barnsley Football Club either, because they produced a lot of players. But back in the 90s, when I look at what we had then and what they have now, it's worlds apart. In terms of there's a big thing made now about S&C. There's a big thing made about diet, and we after training, in the Premier League with Barnsley, in the Championship with Barnsley. We literally finished training and there was a sandwich shop at the bottom of the road. And, if we had 2 sessions a day, or even, if it was 1 session a day, you'd finish training, you'd have a bottle of Lucozade, a bottle of water, you'd get in the car, you'd drive home, you'd have your lunch at home. If there was a double session, we all used to walk down to the sandwich shop. You'd grab a sandwich, you'd walk back up, you'd sit in the dressing room. Nowadays it's cordon bleu. You've got Michelin-starred chefs working at football clubs, and obviously we look after a lot of players. And one of the biggest complaints I hear now is, the food's not very good at the club. And you're like, hold on, what do you mean it's not very? And honestly, but I look back and I think, we coped. We all kept ourselves fit. The gym weren't high tech. There was a bench press machine. There was the old fashioned quad and hamstring machine. There was the pec deck. But we used to do pull ups. We used to do press ups. It was all about the training that you were doing, during the football sessions, and hey, everything's more advanced, and fair play, they've got everything now at their disposals. But I think also what it does is it takes away any excuses for me. If young players now don't make it in the modern system, they can't really blame anybody, because they have literally got everything in front of them. Probably at the top level, the Cat 1 clubs probably, your Manchester City, Manchester United's, Arsenal's, Tottenham's, Liverpool, they provide their young players with probably better facilities than some Championship first teams. They have more staff members. Staff members now at football clubs are incredible. And it's great because we've got more people employed in the game. But I do sometimes think, is it overkill? Is there too much? As the game sort of lost what it's all about, really. Let's face it, it's about getting out on the training pitch, and it's Tuesday night, Saturday afternoon. It's the games. But yeah, in I suppose in many ways, I'm probably jealous. If I could have come up in a system that's got the facilities that modern clubs have now, you always think, could you have played at a higher level? Could you have played internationally? Probably not, because in the end, I weren't good enough. I was good enough to have, I feel like I had a fantastic career. Don't get me wrong, and I enjoyed every minute. But you look at some of the players now and where they get to. You just think, it's ifs and buts. But yeah, I do think the game's changed a hell of a lot.
Well, it's an interesting argument and discussion to have, isn't it? Because as you say, you can argue there's no excuses for young footballers making their way in the game today. They have all the facilities, all the technology, all the information at their disposal. But I know from talking to players that were at the height of their career when you were starting out in the mid-90s, and you'd turn up for pre-season training and you'd do bleep tests or you'd run hills, and they will tell me that was an experience that bonded the squad together. It made them the player they were out on the pitch, and it was character building. So I suppose the question I've got is, which would you rather have if you were starting out now? And is there an argument that says probably there's a bit to be taken from both?
Yeah, I think you're spot on, and I think there is. I think back to when we were apprentices, and we talk about now about minutes out on the training pitch and how much of these scholars, how much individual work are they getting, how much technical work and physical work, and I think back, if Barnsley had a game on a Saturday afternoon, a home game. Barnsley's first team had a game on Saturday afternoon and then a home game on the Tuesday night. We wouldn't be on the training ground Monday, Tuesday, because we used to clean the stadium. We swept the stadium. We cleaned all the outside. We emptied the bins. Pre-season, any Barnsley fans that listen, they still, and the wall's still there, but, there used to be a bigger red wall all the way around Oakwell. And we used to undercoat it and we used to paint it red, and I think them days, and I speak to quite a few lads who were apprentices with me back in the day. They went on to do other things. They didn't make it pro, but even in their world of what they've gone into, they always refer back to them days of of being grounding, it taught us. We all had two players to look after. We had to make sure their kit was out, their trainers were out, their boots were out, whatever they needed for training. Did they wear tracky bottoms in the winter? Did they wear 3/4? I looked after Neil Redfern, who was like me. Red as you just used to train in a t-shirt, a pair of shorts and a pair of socks, unless it was like freezing and snowing, and then he might just put a jumper on, whereas other lads had hats, scarves, gloves, but you had to know that as their apprentice. You had to know what they needed, and
you do realise there's probably strength and conditioning coaches and data analysts listening to this and shivering noticeably right now at hearing the way you describe training techniques from back in the day.
Yeah, but again, I think there's room for that in the modern game because of the way the game's developed, but we never used to ask for us running stats. We never used to, we didn't get clips to watch. I remember making me home debut against Crystal Palace in the Premier League for Danny. And I remember going up to Danny Wilson and saying, Gaffer, who do you think will be up top tomorrow for them? And he went, Morgs, it don't matter who's up top. Just go and play against them. You'll be fine. And maybe that was him trying to protect me so I didn't overthink. But again, in my job now, I speak to lads who are making their debuts and, they've sat 3 or 4 hours in an analyst room looking at, strengths and weaknesses of the opposition. And, sometimes that's good, but then is it overkill? Is there too much information in the modern game? We talk about coaching, are players overcoached? Do we take the natural ability out of players? And again, we could probably sit on this podcast, Rich, for 6 hours and keep talking about all the different things now that go on in the modern game. And our time was our time, and I speak to other players. I'm 47 now. I speak to players at 57, 67, and everybody will tell you that their era was different, and that's what I mean. Like, you get to my age now, and I do feel like an old man when I'm talking to the young players, and you think, I didn't actually finish that long ago, but the differences in the game are incredible.
It's interesting that you mentioned differences in the game and different eras, because anybody that follows football will have seen on social media over the past couple of years that there's a great piece of footage that's put together comparing the managerial styles of Pep Guardiola and all the success he's enjoyed with Manchester City to your dressing room at Sheffield United when Neil Warnock's the manager and doing his nut at half-time of a game and not pulling any strings. Now, in your career, you've played for, as you say, Danny Wilson, Neil Warnock. You've worked alongside Brian Robson, Nigel Clough, just to mention a few. All of them with their own different styles of leadership and management. What works in a dressing room in your experience?
I think plain and simple honesty. All the best managers that I worked for were honest people. That dressing room of people talk about it being a private area, and it's the epicenter of a football club for me. It's what goes on before the game, half time, after. That's, things can be said, people can be criticised, people can be patted on the back. But the best managers that I worked for, and I worked for a lot of good people, and a lot of I worked with a lot of good people. But for me, the best managers, obviously, Danny gave me my debut. Danny came back to Sheffield United and gave me my first opportunity, on the coaching side of things. And then obviously I left Sheffield United to go to Chesterfield with him. Danny was an unbelievable influence on my career, as was Neil Warnock. In terms of, Neil signed me, after that League One season with Barnsley, where, honestly, Rich, I thought I'd been shocking. I thought that my career was going the other way. I never dreamt at that point when that season finished at Barnsley that, I'd be captain in a team winning the Championship, going back to the Premier League. So I owe both them people, a lot. But in terms of, going on to the coaching side, Nigel Clough, Nigel. And, I hope if Nigel listens to this, he doesn't take this as a criticism, but Nigel was very, very simple in his approach, but very, very effective as well, in terms of football's football. Get good players, just give them enough information, and let the players go and play. And I think a lot of that is lost in the modern game. I think a lot of it now is quite robotic. I watch a lot of football, from under 15, under 16s, right up to senior football, whether that's National League, League Two, League One, Premier League, all the way through, whatever. And that's one of the best parts of my job. But I do think football's come quite robotic. So I think for me, if you were to say the biggest influences from managers is just honesty and simplicity, and trust in the players.
Again, interesting you should say that, because we're all aware of analytics and the part they play in sport now increasingly. But if you go back to, say, the Kevin Keegan Newcastle side, the likes of David Ginola were never expected to defend. He was brought into the team by Keegan just to attack, have the flair, create opportunities. Are we missing that in the game of football right now?
Yeah, I think them types of people are referred to as mavericks. Just people that are naturally good footballers. I, as a centre back and as a defender, I liked structure. I loved structure. I loved being organised. And for me, your goalkeeper, your back four, now, what is it? Number sixes, DCMs, whatever you want to, we always used to have a holding midfield player. And that was probably, Monty, and the rest of the lads at United, it was like, right, you lot go and do what you want in the final third. You lot go and win us the game. And if we're in trouble, it'd have been Paddy in goal, the back four, and probably Mont sat in front of the back four. So it was basically attack with five, defend with five. You know what I mean? And that's what it was. I spoke to Alan Wright actually the other day. Alan's doing a similar job to me now, and it just brought back. There was now defenders are playing 1-2s with keepers in the 6-yard box. I remember a time at Bramall Lane when Alan Wright had just signed. Alan had a top career. He'd just come from Aston Villa. He'd been at Middlesbrough, and Alan threw a ball back to me. And we were never allowed to have the ball, and he actually caught me by surprise. And Alan, he went to throw it down the line, changed his mind, threw it back to me. He sort of surprised me. I was playing left-hand side centre-half. I had a touch and went to clip it down the line and clipped it out of play. And I remember the gaffer, Neil, shouting, "Righty, if you ever throw Morgs a ball again, I'll fine you." And all the crowd sat behind the dugout started laughing, but it was like a standing joke. It was like, no, my defenders just play 2-touch in your own half. Your defenders for a reason, and probably if we had been allowed to play a little bit more, we might have flourished. We might have surprised the gaffer and showed him that we were good footballers. But
I know that's not an accurate retelling of that story, Morgs, because there wasn't one expletive in your quote from Neil Warnock there.
Yeah, I tried to keep it clean. Yeah, there was a couple of expletives, but I just remember all the fans sat behind the dugout laughing. And do you know, if that happened now in the modern game, it'd be all over Twitter. There'd be comments, but it was just it was right. And I remember Righty just chuckling as if to say, probably looked and thought, what club have I come to?
Well, let's move it forward to the current day, because as you touched upon earlier, you now work as an agent for Stella Group. You're going up and down the country, up and down the various divisions, looking at by and large young talent, up and coming potential. What is it that you're looking for? And to a degree, given what you've said, do you feel a little bit constrained sometimes because sports science in the ever-increasing professional world and nature of football plays a more and more prominent role? Does that restrict what you're able to see?
No, I don't think it restricts. Like I say, I think the modern day, S&C and all the analytical stuff is there to help the players. My worry sometimes, and again, you've touched on this in terms of you used to turn up for pre-season and, there was no heart monitors, there was no graphs showing who was in the red zone, who was in the greens. Literally, the day was planned. And if you got up the next morning and you couldn't walk and your calves were tight and your hamstrings were screaming and you got in there and it was like, well, you better go and have a stretch because we're going again, and I don't know. And people, and this always opens up conversation, which is the great thing about football. I never remember as many injuries as what we sort of get now, and that I genuinely think, and people, and again, open it up. I'm open to argument. Well, it's not argument; it's discussion. I think we were fitter back then. I do. I do think we were fitter.
You realise that experts in their field will be listening, saying, "How can you argue that when we've got the metrics in front of us? We can, break down with GPS tags each individual, try and optimise what their workload is." The question's going to be, "What's your basis for saying that?"
Well, my basis from, I suppose, from a professional point of view, these are all professional people. I'm talking as an ex-athlete, ex-footballer, that went into the coaching. I did my pro license, so I like to think that I've got a good knowledge, but I haven't got the equipment that they use. So that's probably where they'll come in and they say, well, listen, Chris, if you want to come and sit in my office, and I'm pals with loads of S&C coaches, so I've got no problems, and I think they play a real good role. But in terms of why do I think we were fitter? How can I word it? I don't think there were as many. There weren't as many players in the squad. So when it was Saturday, Tuesday, you just had to get on with it, and you could turn up for a game on a Tuesday night and actually your body felt depleted, but you knew that you just had to get on with it. The manager just picked the same team. We see a lot of rotation now and the squads are bigger. So there probably would be an argument of people might sit and watch this and say, well, he ain't got a clue what he's on about. He's just literally throwing a comment out there. But it's just experiences from talking to modern day players on how they feel, and I genuinely feel that pre-season is the time where you get your fitness. It's where we talk about now that the word robust gets thrown about a lot, and I don't think modern day players are as robust as what the players were back in the day. And again, if I spoke to Tony Curry at Sheffield United, TC had said to me, well, Moggs, we only had one substitute back in the day. So you're talking, like we had 3 and then 5, so he'd have the argument that they were fitter. And I think this is why football's such a fantastic game. But yeah, just, I suppose it's opinion based, and that's where my thing will break down. Somebody will come to me with all the stats and say, Chris, you're talking nonsense because the modern day footballer does this, that, and the other. And is the game quicker? I don't know. I played with a lot of quick players, a lot of fast players, and did they have as many hamstrings? We talk about quick players now always suffer with hamstrings, and I think about people like Kyle Walker was only with us for a short while, but Jags was always one of the quickest players, and did they suffer with hamstrings? I can't remember them suffering a lot with hamstrings, whereas modern day flying machines seem to pull up a lot hamstring wise.
Speaking of that, to what extent then do you use modern day sports science, be it analytics or whatever information might be at your disposal, when you go to a game and you're looking at a particular player on the pitch, or you're inquiring about some young and up and coming player through a club's academy?
We don't necessarily use the fitness based analytical stuff. We have access to Y Scout, so we can go on and look at like pass completion, goals scored, minutes on the pitch, so we can get that types of information. We can't get
Is
sort
that
of the
useful
distant.
in your role now?
Yeah, I think it is. Again, I'm quite old fashioned. I like to go and watch a player, and the first thing I look at is his character. How does he warm up? But again, I'll throw that straight in terms of sometimes I'll watch a player and I think, he's not warmed up very good, but then he goes out and plays absolutely brilliant in 90 minutes. And again, I played with lads, Keith Gillespie. Keith Gillespie had probably just sat in the dressing room and he didn't want to go outside. He didn't want to touch it because he was a good player. So I played with players who hated warming up. So again, I like to watch players and I think, yeah, he looks nice and bright. He's at it. He looks like he's come prepared to play a game of football. Sometimes in the winter, if you see lads and they've got the sleeves pulled up and they've got the hats pulled, you sort of think, is he actually prepared to play football? And you know what? If they go and then into the game with that type of attitude, certainly if you see them 3, 4, 5 times and they do the same thing, you tend to be putting a line through them. And I sit with a lot of the scouts from football clubs who do the same thing. So I think whether you're doing recruitment for an agency or a club, we're looking at the same things. So I like to see players who come prepared for work. Not of it's a bit cold tonight, I'm not sure whether it's what I want. Because you think about that on a cold Tuesday night away from home somewhere and you've got to turn up and you're going for promotion and you need a win, then, well, yeah, you ain't got time for players like that. Them type of players might as well stay on the bus.
Is having the right mental mindset every bit as important then when you're looking at players as being athletically gifted, having the natural talent?
Yeah, I genuinely think when we're recruiting players, we're basically looking at Cat 1 and Cat 2 academies, and I think every player from 16 to, let's say, 2021, if they're in a good club, in a good category academy, and that's not me saying that good players don't come from lower academies, they do, but in general, that's the area that you're looking at. Every now and again, there will be one that comes up lower down, but yeah, I think the players at them levels are all at them levels because they've got ability, and they're all of a similar ability. So then you're looking at the mental approach to the game, the character, and you can never know a player's full character if you're not in and around them. The coaches will, because they see how they walk in the building in the morning, they see how they leave the building at night. What's their approach to training? What's their approach to the gym work? We literally get to see them playing the game. But still, you're recruiting character. Because if players have got ability and they've got a good character, I think it's the old saying of ability will only take you so far. The top players have got character in an abundance. If you look at goalkeepers, if you look at defenders, that make mistakes, if you're a defender or a goalkeeper that makes mistakes and you go under, you're never really going to play at a high level. If you're playing in front of 80,000 people and you drop a goo-goo, then you've got to have broad shoulders and you've got to get on with it, and you are going to get criticised. I think it's tough for modern day footballers that, they literally get criticised from people that are not even watching the games. People who are sat at home and they might have seen something on Twitter, then all of a sudden they're hammering people and it becomes quite personal. I think for us back in the day, it was basically fish and chip paper, weren't it? It was in the paper the next morning, and if you got slaughtered a little bit, it was the Barnsley Chronicle back in the day when I was at Barnsley. The people would write, but they'd only probably have 6 or 7 letters on the inside page, and they were just short little snippets of, criticism towards players. That's easy to avoid, so I think the mental side of the game is more important. It's always been important, but I do think it's more important now than it ever has been because the modern day player is so much more open to criticism.
Yeah, there's certainly many more external factors that the modern professional athlete has to contend with, aren't there? We're going to have to wrap this up because we're almost out of time, Chris. But just finally, given your experience from what you went through as a player and the way your career turned out to what you see now and the athletes that you deal with, when you've got a young pro in front of you, what advice do you try and give them as they're setting out on their own career path?
devote your life to it. Try every day like it's your last day. You know, I think probably every lad at school, or 98% of lads at school and girls now, but we're talking about lads who I look after. Just literally give it your all. Devote your life to it, because the life of a footballer is only short, and you only realise that when you're finished. While you're doing it, you think it's going to go on forever. Unfortunately, I thought Rich, I thought I'd play into my late 30s, even playing sort of non-league stuff in my 40s. Unfortunately, I had a nasty knee injury that sort of brought everything to an end. I think that was, I had my operation on my 33rd birthday, and all of a sudden that's done. And it's like, right, I was 2 years in rehab. What do we do next? I think it's a natural thing to go into coaching. Players sort of stick to what they know. There's only a few that come away and do something different. And now I've found I'm 7 years into being an agent now. Probably when I was playing, I'd never thought about doing this job. So I think the best advice is to any young player, if you've got a chance of being a professional, it's a fantastic career. Devote your life to it. Give it your absolute max. Don't have any excuses. Just give everything every day. Try and keep level-headed. Try and keep concentrated, but certainly enjoy it. Try and play football with a smile on your face. It's a difficult career. My boss now always says to me, the majority of footballers, unless you're a top footballer, might only have two good seasons in a career. Might only be 2 seasons that you look back on and think, I really enjoyed that. The other ones, you're fighting relegation, or you've got an injury, you can't get in the team. So I think when you have opportunity, enjoy it. Get a smile on your face, enjoy training, enjoy the camaraderie with the boys, because that's the bit they miss when you retire.
Solid advice for sure. What's next in your diary? Where we'll next see you?
I'm at Sheffield United v Derby County FA Youth Cup tonight up at York City Stadium. So that's where I'm going. I've got a couple of transfers that are rumbling on, so I'll try and get a little bit of more information on that this afternoon. See if we can get them done. And yeah, we just then basically work into the 3rd of Feb for when the window closes.
Well, listen, Chris, really appreciate your time. Always great to catch up, and all the best now in what's likely to be a hectic few weeks, certainly for you and the Stellar Group, as the window grinds towards a close at the beginning of February.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rich. Appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Unlocking sports science to push the limits of human potential. This is the Science for Sport podcast.
Many thanks to Chris Morgan for joining me on today's show and discussing his thoughts on the fast evolving world of science and its impact on sport, and particularly the game of football. If you want to find out more, then you can do so by going to our website, www.scienceforsport.com. And if you've enjoyed this episode, then please help us spread the word and share it, be it with a coach, a colleague, an athlete or a friend. Remember, the more downloads we get, the easier it is for us to attract top-name athletes and experts at the very top and cutting edge of their field. Well, that's just about all from me for this edition. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to talking to you again on the next edition of the Science for Sport podcast.
Subscribe to the Science for Sport podcast now, wherever you listen to your podcasts. For more insights, resources, and to join the Academy, visit scienceforsport.com and connect with us on social media by searching for @ScienceForSport. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.